Hello, everyone, and welcome to the second episode of That's Fighting. I'm Michael Mayers. Joined with me, as always, is Nathan Santos and
on,
Chad
everybody?
Juice. Now,
What's up, guys?
we're coming off the heels of a crazy UFC 249, boys. We have a lot that we want to break down for you guys. We're going to start off with our top 5 moments of the night in a segment that we like to call 5 Good Rounds. Now, kicking things off, we are going to start with the absolute stud that showed up and really made a name for himself, the one and only Bryce Mitchell, showing that twister that he landed last year, late in the year, that is, in October, I believe, was not a fluke. In fact, he successfully attempted 4 more twister attempts on a very underrated black belt in jiu-jitsu in his own right, in Charles Rosa. Quickly, what are some of your initial takeaways from the grappling clinic that was put on from Thug Nasty, Bryce Mitchell? Nate?
Well, let me just say, I didn't get a lot of my predictions right, but this one I sure did. Oh my God. Let me tell you, Bryce Mitchell is something else on the ground. Like, I think, like, as you said, right, that twister was not a fluke. I couldn't believe, I was losing my mind watching that fight, thinking, oh my God, he's going to land another twister. This is ridiculous. And then just the way he was able to play Charles Rosa, where essentially he's like, I'm going to go for a twister, and then if you escape, I'm going to mount you, and then as you turn, I'm going to go for a head and arm choke, and then as you turn, I'm going to get your back, and it was just a repetitive cycle doing that for the entire fight. I think we predicted that he would submit Charles Rosa, and he won by like 10, what was it, 30-24 in some scorecards. Like, it was 10-8 rounds every round. Hats off to Charles Rosa, who was a formidable opponent, for not tapping, because he was in just exhaustion at some point. But Bryce Mitchell is one to watch now, especially if he can implement this game plan like someone as dominant as somebody like Khabib can, where it's like, listen, you know what I'm going to do, but you can't stop it. We might have a real problem on our hands.
100%. I agree with you. I couldn't agree with you more. Bryce Mitchell was using a twister to then make Charles Rosa react and end up in full mount, and then arm triangle, and then twister, and then, oh, you're scrambling, I'm gonna throw a scissor onto your opposite leg, and again twister. And I've never seen someone take a technique that difficult to lock up and just throw it out there constantly. It is honestly almost as difficult as trying to throw up go-go platas or omoplatas and just throwing them up like they're nothing. Just commonplace. I'm going to throw up a twister per round, attempt per round. Like, I there's something about this kid that's just got star potential written all over him. And it's funny. I don't know if you guys know this, but he was begging Uncle Dana for camo shorts, and he's finally acquiesced. He's softened his stance, and he's willing to let Bryce Mitchell wear camo shorts during his next UFC outing. So star power wins you good graces of Uncle Dana there in the octagon. Now, Bryce Mitchell looks like he's going to be one of those top contenders. Now, obviously, Jad, you practice some Brazilian jiu-jitsu. What were some of your takeaways from him being able to just slap on some very difficult techniques at a high level to put on a blue belt, let alone a black belt?
Yeah, no, I loved it, man. I was just on the edge of my seat the whole time, especially when he was setting up the twisters and stuff. I was like, this is unheard of. This guy's setting it up over and over and over again. Because I've obviously, like you said, I've trained, and I love Eddie Bravo and stuff. So it's always tempting to try some of his stuff during rows. And I've tried the twister a few times, and honestly, just landing in the position where you got the bottom leg and you're trying to go over the arm, just getting to that position is next to impossible for me. So, I was like, why? How is he getting there so easy? I want to know, and then, yeah, I feel like he could have gotten it a lot earlier and stuff. He could have definitely finished it. He also tried a bunch of head and arm chokes before that, right?
Yep.
So I think he was very close for the head and arm chokes. He was staying in the mount. I feel like he should have gone to the side and just separated the classic way to finish a head and arm choke.
Mm-hmm.
And he could have definitely finished it. I don't know if it's a lack of anything in his grappling, because obviously his grappling is amazing. So, Yeah, man, I have a lot of hope for the guy. I think he's gonna show us some amazing submissions in the future. His striking is not bad at all, and yeah, I'm very hopeful for his future, man. He's one of the next big ones.
I have a
Another,
question for you
go ahead.
guys.
Go ahead.
Were you guys a little bit surprised that he didn't use more ground and pound? Because I really thought that in some of the positions when Charles Rosa wasn't tapping to anything, I mean, don't get me wrong, he put on an absolute clinic, and we can all agree on that. But I thought at some point when he's just effortlessly grabbing his back and going to full mount, and he's like, okay, maybe if I'm not submitting this guy, if I have the position anyway, do you think it was that he was afraid to gas out? Because as he says, he's a different cardiovascular machine, but it looked like he didn't want to expend that energy on just, dropping elbows, if nothing else, because he was so high on the mount anyway, right? What do you guys think about that?
Three things to take away from that. He really was able to hit some elbows from a twister position when he had Charles Rosa's arm behind his, but he didn't quite tuck his arm behind Charles Rosa's.
Right.
He threw some elbows to the body and one to the face that were pretty nasty. I'm like, oh my goodness, like you can really get some strikes off. Grapple stamina is a little bit different than strike stamina, and it ties in with with point C, which is he is not looking to give up unnecessary space, and to ground and pound, you need to create space. He wanted to glue himself to his opponent and force his opponent to continue to grapple. So yes, ground and pound could have paid dividends, but A, if that's not your bread and butter, and B, if you're trying to gas your opponent out and obviously win these rounds 10-8, throwing some punches might throw you into a position to get thrown into an arm bar, or just at least even let him back up to his feet. Each time that hit the mat, it wasn't getting back up because he was using grappling as opposed to striking. But it's a good question. What do you think there, John?
I think you're actually very right, man. I think when you strike and you like separate yourself a little bit to create that space to throw punches, you definitely risk getting swept or armbarred, like you said, or anything like that. And you definitely can miss on a lot of submission opportunities, right? Because like to get the submission, you got to set it up and you got to be tight and all that stuff, and erase that kind of like distance in between you. So I think that he was smart to keep that. I didn't see any mistakes of him really on the ground. He was very very structured. So I think overall, man, he can definitely use ground and pound in the future, but considering how good his submission game is, that's fine.
Yeah, I was just going to say, do you guys think that he was weary of Charles Rosa's black belt? And if given a higher ranked opponent whose maybe jiu-jitsu isn't as high, do you think then he might implement some more, ground and pound to his game? Because, yeah, obviously, exactly what you guys said, you have to create space to create strikes. And maybe his game plan isn't to smash you on the ground. It's literally just to exhaust you trying to land these exceptional submissions. And if that's the game plan, then by all means, go ahead. I was just surprised that someone as dominant as that didn't try to, smash him when he was in those positions, even if he could, climb. You guys remember like DC does this every once in a while, and John Jones, like it's usually the heavier guys who almost climb into a mounted crucifix position and then just drop elbows onto the head. I felt that he could have probably done that against Charles Rosa, but elected not to. And you guys are probably right. Maybe it's because he's, a high ranking black belt in his own right. So you guys think if Bryce Mitchell's next opponent is, someone whose jiu-jitsu isn't as good, he might implement more ground and pound, or do you think he's just going to stick with this, trying to submit you at all costs?
If you're on the ground with Bryce Mitchell and he's in any type of a grappling situation, you're in dire straits and you are always at risk to get tapped out. And I think trying to get away from the game plan, that is like being a boxer and be like, yeah, maybe I'll start throwing some head kicks. To me, it's like, if it's working and you can get them to the ground and you can like make them, you can break their will. I mean, Charles Rosa, there has a lot to be said about his game, his gamesmanship to not succumb to the 12 submission attempts that were thrown his way throughout the match. Not a lot of people are surviving that first round, that first takedown, that first attempt. He defended perfectly and was scrambling perfectly. And the ability of Bryce Mitchell to mix the wrestling where he's flowing on top and allowing you to roll, but he's on top of you still. versus mixing that in with the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu where you're clamping on, chest down, chest to chest, everything like that. There's no reason to really incorporate ground and pound, if you ask me. In fact, you should invite them to try to throw some ground and pound and see what happens from that perspective, and maybe try to throw some stuff onto them trying to beat you up if they're stupid enough to stay on the ground. That is a guy where it's Damian Maia level. We don't even really need to see anymore. Like, if it hits the mat, you got to get up. I don't care who you are, get up, because you're in trouble. You're just going to be in trouble, period.
You know, what I'd like to see is Bryce Mitchell, and this is, you know, obviously the UFC knows you don't want to crush your prospect right away, but I would love to see Bryce Mitchell take someone on who is very effective off their back. Like Bryce Mitchell fights a 145, right?
Mm-hmm.
Who's a really good 145er off his back? What is it? T-City. T-City, right? So if that is the level that Bryce Mitchell will get to in, let's say he does this to his next 3 opponents, and then he can fight someone like a Brian Ortega.
Middle of 2021, that's a possibility.
Right. Like, how will this line up? And I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves here, but obviously I think right now we're all so high on Bryce Mitchell that we could see the world of him, and getting to a number 1 contendership where he implements his game plan like that, who's going to stop him? It's the same thing that they said about, well, what if Khabib were to fight, you know, Brian Ortega, someone who's really good off his back and can catch you in, you know, all sorts of chokes. What happens then? I'm excited to see stylistically what the worst matchup is for Bryce Mitchell. Is it a lethal striker with good takedown defense, or is it someone who is fine to be taken down but is even more dangerous off his back than Bryce Mitchell is from the top?
These are all very interesting things to consider for a very exciting Thug Nasty. Bryce Mitchell putting himself on the map during a card that had somewhere in the upwards of 700,000 buys, really putting himself on the international scene. Another man who made a big name for himself coming up here in round 2 of the five good rounds. We have Calvin Kattar and his stellar performance against Jeremy Stephens. In the lead up to this, I had Calvin Kattar winning this fight. I thought his boxing was underrated, and even so, he despite finishing it with a step-in elbow, which is absolutely disgusting, the hands are what set it up. And I was surprised even at the level of how good he was at a simple 1-2 combination. He had Jeremy Stephens reeling. He wasn't really sure what was going on. I mean, it was a little bit back and forth at the beginning, but Calvin Kattar just took over and went full speed ahead. What were some of your takeaways from this stellar performance where Calvin Kattar made a name for himself in his own right there, Nate?
I'll tell you what, Mike, you know that I picked Jeremy Stephens to win this, and that's because of stylistically the matchup, right? I thought that maybe Jeremy Stephens, based on what we've seen in his very long UFC career, had the style where if he's facing another boxer, someone who's not especially evasive or elusive, like someone like a Max Holloway, or you know, someone who's not linear per se, as Calvin Kattar is, I thought he'd have the edge. However, Calvin Kattar really impressed me on Saturday night. As you said, Mike, with the step-in elbow, that was so vicious that he just stepped it, knocked him down, and then cut him open with the follow-up elbow. I'll tell you what, the Pride of Boston, you know, they have a good one. And I am now convinced, more so than before, that Calvin Kattar might have what it takes to go the distance in a stacked featherweight division. Now, there's a few things to be said. I am very upset with Jeremy Stephens for missing weight by 4.5 pounds. As you guys know,
egregious. He weighed in first and was overweight by 5.5 pounds. Technically, It's not a championship fight, so 4.5. So yes, which is just embarrassing, like, for the sport. And he did confiscate 30% of, or he lost rather 30% of his purse to Calvin Kattar. And, you know, maybe that'll cover the bonus that Calvin Kattar didn't get because of how good this card was. And we're going to get to that, you know, the rest of it. But I was embarrassed when Jeremy Stephens missed weight by that much, because I didn't think that he would. And for him to weigh in first and over by that much is like he's not even trying. And then he got knocked out. So, I mean, it's almost, was that karma? Maybe. Is Calvin Kattar now a new, very, very important figure in the division? Absolutely. That was definitely an if you don't know, now you know moment for Calvin Kattar there. I mean, hey, what's interesting to me too is the financial structure of it all. If Jeremy Stevens was to win, his win bonus would already cover the fact that his purse got taken away 30% of it. So
Hmm.
it's pretty like the risk versus reward of not making weight by that much of an amount. Like for me, there needs to be a scaling factor. 2 pounds, 20%, and for every other additional pound, another 10%.
I
That
completely agree.
that'll make
Yeah,
that'll make some people think twice about weighing in 4.5, 5.5 pounds overweight. It's
yeah,
egregious because if you look at the historical balance of people that came in overweight and their record, it's a positive. It's a major positive, something like
almost
70%
always
win
win.
percentage. It's not fair. So
Not to
for the
mention,
penalty for the penalty not to match it, that's not okay with me.
Not to mention, Chael Sonnen is always notorious for saying, if you had asked him at any fight, would you take the money for this guy to miss weight? And you'd say yes, because the most important thing is money. However, would you give up that money to have to cut less weight? And the answer is still yes, right? So he's thinking, okay, well, at least for Calvin Kattar, I'm gonna get, something like 30 extra percent. I actually thought it'd be more because for 4.5 pounds, I thought it would be 50% of his purse, but I guess the commission of Florida, I don't know if they have a precedent to confiscate that large a percentage of a purse, but I was very disappointed in Stevens, and I think I completely agree with you. It should be a higher fee for every additional pound that you weigh over.
Jad, what are your thoughts on this
Um,
fight and him not weighing in?
Honestly, in terms of the fight, I would say I think it has nothing to do with the weight that he lost.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of like I don't know karma, whatever. Like I mean, I just think he was not as good of a striker as Kevin Kattar. It was just as simple as that. Like Kattar was just a lot sharper, a lot more aggressive. Just dominated that sector from my standpoint. But in terms of the weight, I'm also kind of like on the fence about that because um, honestly, I'm against weight cutting in the first place. I think it's a
Mm-hmm.
pointless endeavor for fighters. Putting their bodies through that is totally unhealthy and all that stuff. So I don't blame him too much. I get the whole disrespect. You got to be a professional and all that stuff. But at the end of the day, when it's kind of like a short notice sort of thing, kind of like this, and like you don't know if it's gonna happen or not, and also I don't know, man. I think it's on the UFC a little bit. It's time to change up the just the rules and stuff
Mm-hmm.
about weight cutting and just maybe open it up a little more, open up a couple more weight divisions or whatever the case might be. And there's not going to be as many problems, man. And if you, at the end of the day, if you try to fight at a certain weight class and you miss weight a couple times, you're not allowed to fight at that weight class no more. It should be just
Mm-hmm.
as easy as
Right.
that, you know?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I
Yeah, I
agree.
agree. By
That's
the
a
way,
great point.
I agree with what you said, Jed. I don't. I think if anything, Stevens had another reason to win by not having to cut an extra 4.5, pounds, and still lost. So I'm not saying that. I think he was at a benefit there and lost.
Right.
No, no, no.
Yeah, yeah,
Like
yeah.
he should have, if anything, won because he didn't. I mean, poor Stevens though. He probably cut a lot of weights though up to that point because as we know, Jeremy Stevens walks around 180.
Mm.
So for him, he had cut a lot of weight, and I guess he just wasn't into it for the last 5 pounds. And yeah, maybe it's on the UFC because it was pretty short notice for him when that fight was announced. And usually he has, I guess, 8-10 weeks to lose
Right.
all that weight, and he
Yes.
couldn't make it anymore. Regardless, he, by all account, if you weigh in that heavy, you should have had the advantage. And you're right, he got outclassed and knocked out.
Yeah.
That's it, and that concludes round two. Now round three here. Let's get right into it. Francis Ngannou. Two words and 20 seconds later, Yair Rozenstruik is on the ground, unconscious, not sure where he is. They were asking him, "What city are you in? Do you know where you are? Do you know what day it is?" And he had no answer for any of these questions. So clearly, the hand of God, the twisted African steel that is Francis Ngannou, rained down with ferocity only God himself could imbue in a man's fists. Francis Ngannou is the scariest man on the planet. I don't care what anybody says. That is just the fact of the matter. When he literally, if he touches you, you go to sleep. So with that being said, I do have a lot to say in terms of takeaways from this fight, specifically in the way that Yair approached getting out of the way of these punches. Straight line backing up is never the answer. Fadeaway leg kicks, never the answer. And Francis's technique was sloppy. He came in there just winging punches, just winging them. And if that's a crisp boxer, if that's someone like Stipe with a tight check jab, tight check hook, if that's DC and you're leaning forward with your chest way over your ankles, you're getting taken down with a double leg. Against the best of the best, you can't come out like that. That's my first. I have some more stuff to say, but I'm going to turn it over to you, Nate. What's some of your takeaways from this 20-second catastrophe for Jairzinho Rozenstruik?
Yeah, well, two things. One, yeah, you corrected at the end there, Jairzinho, right? And two, your tee up there was twice as long as Francis's last 5 fights combined. And what does that tell us? Like, that's unbelievable. The last 5 in the UFC heavyweight division, his last 5 fights have each been under 90 seconds. The most recent of which came in 20 seconds, something like that.
Flat.
20 seconds flat, and flat lined Jairzinho, right? Now, I agree with what you're saying about being wild, but I also think there's something to being wild where if there is no consequence, because if you land, it's over, then it makes you seem very, very intimidating. And I think you're right against probably someone who is Stipe Miocic or Daniel Cormier. He probably has to be a little more conservative and less wary. I mean, he already lost to Francis, to Stipe, but as he said, that was, he had no respect for that fight. He didn't train at all. He gassed out completely, and then he was terrified in his fight that followed because he never wanted to be that tired again. Now he seems like he's back as a man on a mission. But what else do you do with Francis now, right? Like, he's beaten everyone below him, pretty much, of the other top 5, top 6, top 7.
Yes, he has.
And then he lost to the champ, so he's not going to fight Blades for a 3rd time and knock him out again, and as quickly as he does. What is there to do with this monster that is Francis Ngannou? I agree with you. I think he's the most terrifying man on earth. But I'll tell you what, and we'll get to this a little later. If I had to fight Francis or Justin Gaethje, I'd rather fight Francis, because at least it's one and done, not 25 minutes of torture.
I mean, hey, when you get knocked out, apparently it's the ones that you don't feel. Those are the ones where you get smoked the hardest. I remember Chael Sonnen was talking about what was the hardest you ever got hit, and he was saying, I think it was against Damian Maia, I believe he said. He said, like, it's not the ones where they hit you hard. You don't feel it. You're numb. But when you're getting smacked and it's not knocking you out, and it's not shaking your cobwebs, you feel like, ow, I don't want that anymore. Right. Stop it. That's an interesting way to look at it too. I agree. In terms of Francis winging punches, man, I'm telling you right now, man, that is an all or nothing type of approach. Rozenstruik kind of missed the ball there. You need to circle out, duck under the hooks, and get out of there. Your back's against the cage, and you're throwing a leg kick. It didn't work for Holly Holm against Amanda Nunes when she went low with a leg kick and got smoked upside the head with a head kick. I'm not a big fan of leg kicks when your back's against the cage, just personally. I just think that should be a rule of thumb. Circle away, circle out, straight line backward in a kickboxing match, which is what this was, is dangerous. Now, the reason I'm saying that Francis needs to tighten that up is, yes, the risk versus the reward. The reward is more on his side than it will be for anybody else who goes in and brawls like that. But you're in the heavyweight division. Everyone's got knockout power. Everyone can knock you out at any point. One very smooth, well-placed, timed check hook. We've seen Anderson Silva at much lower weights fade away, throwing hooks, walking backwards, and knock dudes out. So I don't know, Jad. What are some of your takeaways from this?
Yeah, man, I think he had just complete disrespect in a way for Jairzinho's just skills and his ability to maybe be any kind of threat to him. So obviously that's like he fought like the way you would fight like at a bar or something. after you had a few drinks, and you got pissed off at someone, you just want to smash him, I guess. He just like ran forward, just blitzed him. Zero technique, zero footwork, zero accuracy, zero head movement. Like, I mean, completely like he's never trained MMA pretty much. Like, just
It
raw
looked like
power.
World Star Hip Hop with a bunch of steroid juice heads. That's what Brennan Schaub said on this morning's
Yes.
pod.
So
But the
I
thing
think that
is, he
Yeah, go ahead.
won. We have to remember this.
Right.
He won, right? We can't. I think the criticism is he deserves it, but he won. So it doesn't matter. There's nothing, dude. If you can run at someone 9 times out of 10 and knock them out, and the one person you can't do that to is the champion. I mean, I don't think he would have been any more better off by trying to do anything else against Jairzinho, right?
Yeah.
Like, why
Yeah,
would
he
he
did the
fight
right
Jairzinho like you
technique.
would Stipe? He knows he's not going to take him down, and
Right.
why would I wait for you to attack me? No, I'm going to bum rush you. Not to mention, is there anything more terrifying than Francis freaking Ngannou sprinting at you? You're like, where do I go? I'm going to run backwards, because I don't think he's in the mindset to, pivot off the line and try to get out of the way. Not to mention, Francis is sprinting at you. I don't think there's a bigger deer in the headlights moment in the world. And then he evaded how many punches? 3, and then the left hook just good night.
And then it
Also,
just night.
once you kill him, stop hitting him. He's up against the fence, still wailing on him, and the ref has to pull him off. And the ref's already across the freaking cage because he's not going to stand anywhere near these two, right?
Right.
Maybe the lack of technique will work against lower guys, and if it can help build your stature, because literally all you got to do is land one. Just land one.
Well, he did
right?
just he pretty much landed one, right? Because like he threw like how many, 4 or 5?
Yeah,
that
he missed, and then
he
knocked
missed.
him out
Yeah,
with the first one.
uh-huh.
He freaking punched, right?
Correct.
So, and I think he's doing that against the best strikers in the division as well, right? Because you look at the heavyweight division, who's he knocked out? Junior Dos Santos, Alistair Overeem, Jairzinho. These are all guys who have, great boxing and kickboxing records, and he's touching them once, and they're falling asleep. Not to mention, when I fight a wrestler like Curtis Blades, I'm knocking him out too. So probably against DC, it's a little different, and probably against Stipe, it's a little different. In fact, definitely it's a little different, because those are the 2 best guys in the world. But I don't think there's any reason for him to change his style against anybody that isn't those 2 guys, because he knows he can finish him, right?
I'm just saying, all I can say is this. If Yair Rozenstruik lands a clean check hook while you're missing one of those 3 or 4 strikes, you could be going out, period. Point blank.
Yep,
like, you're
that's
putting
right.
yourself in the line of fire, knowing that if you connect, they're out. We've seen a lot of guys with devastating power go into fights like that against guys where maybe their technique is not as good as theirs, and they have all the upper hands, and that bravado, that nature of going in there being like, I'm untouchable, that can be your biggest downfall, knowing full well that if you just got into a normal boxing match, you would have knocked this dude the hell out anyway. I'm just saying, like, you're risking a lot. It worked out. You're playing with real fire in the heavyweight division.
I think Jairzinho just got freaked out, man. He didn't expect like such a start.
Did you see the stare down before they walked out? Before the music hit?
Right. Yes,
he was staring at him. See if you can pull the video up for this, even if it's now or afterward or whatever. But he was staring at Jairzinho across. He was just staring and just not losing eye contact, just standing there like this. And Jairzinho was staring at him and then broke eye contact and looked back. And Francis is still just standing there. He hadn't moved a muscle. Just a predator eyeing his prey. And I think the fight was over. I never saw that footage until after the fight was done. The fight was over before they even stepped into the octagon.
That's right.
The fight was over.
I couldn't find that, but yeah, man, for sure. He was very intimidated.
The fight was over as soon as Jairzinho called him out. Because what did Francis say post-fight? He's like, I think he was calling me out. He didn't really know what he was doing. That's hilarious. That's so funny. He's like, these guys don't know, because they're like, oh, yeah, I want to. What's the old time saying? To get respect, you got to call it the biggest guy in the yard, right?
Yep.
I'll call out Francis. Maybe call it the second biggest guy in the yard.
He just everyone's so big. He thinks he's so big and scary. I got to make a name off of his hype. It's like, bro, this isn't just hype. This is the scariest man on the planet who froze up in a championship fight because of the lack of cardio. If he fixed that, and he's also talking about his BJJ, with his BJJ stepping up. We haven't even seen it yet. This is
well, he's got 4 submission wins, but they're all via powerful explosives. Like, I'm sure he could submit anybody, right? Like any jiu-jitsu guy, he just smash him, right? And then just rip
Bonked
their
him
arm
over the
off.
head.
Right,
And
exactly,
that's
right?
it.
Like,
Take his arm home with them over his shoulder. He's carrying him home.
he's not choking anyone out unless it's with his hand, right? And he's just
God, I would not want to see. I
suffocating.
would not get into that guillotine. Oh my God. That concludes round 3, a very violent one at that. And now round 2. One of the most puzzling things. It wasn't necessarily just how the fight went. I think more so it was what happened after the fight. It was Henry Cejudo defeating Dominick Cruz in a very controversial stoppage by one Keith Peterson. And then retiring afterwards. A lot to unpack here, how the fight went, the retirement itself, and Dominick Cruz's very apt points that he had made about the lucidity of Keith and the wherewithal of Keith Peterson before the fight happened, in the back where he was explaining the rules to him. Smelled like cigarettes and alcohol, maybe from drinking the night before. And he said, if we're top tier fighters and you're a top tier ref, the same should be expected of both of us. Maybe they need to undergo some drug testing. Maybe we should get to do what boxing does and get to vote on which referee that we get to have to do our title fights. Very interesting things amongst a lot of other things that I'll get into when I chime back in. But let's stick to the fight here for a second. Cejudo Cruz, what were some of your takeaways there, Nate?
Well, the thing is, I just want to touch on the ref for 1 second.
Go for it.
I thought that was
Let's do
very, very controversial what Cruz said about, accusing someone of smelling like cigarettes and booze. I remember I was watching the fight here with my sister and my girlfriend and stuff, and they were like, how come the referee changes every fight? And I'm like, oh, well, because they don't work for the UFC. They work for the commission, and the commission appoints based on the fight. And they go, well, wouldn't they just want the best one to be the ref for all of them? And I'm thinking, yeah, probably, right? Like, Herb Dean would probably, if they voted on it, Herb Dean would be the referee 100%. Of every single fight, right?
Yep.
And and we'll get to Herb Dean in the main event later, but I thought this stoppage was controversial. And the reason I say that is because the defense was, how can you call someone who is 11 unanswered strikes a controversial stoppage? But a rabbit punch is not necessarily a fair assessment of how many strikes are landed. So let's say not me, because I don't even want to talk about me, but let's say anybody is fighting Israel Adesanya in the middleweight division, and Adesanya lands 10 punches unanswered, just striking, right? Am I stopping the fight because you didn't hit me once in the 10 times that I've hit you? Of course not. So I don't think that's a fair defense to say, because it's not like he was 10 unanswered punches as he's laying there motionless on the ground.
Crumbling. He's not crumbling.
Right. He's trying to stand up and getting hit in the head, but he's not. So are we really going to say that all it takes is 10 unanswered punches for a fight to be stopped? Because if that's the case, that's a dangerous precedent to set, because you can have guys like Adesanya or top-tier strikers who can just light someone up on the feet and then just stop the fight because because they can't land a shot back. I think even if you get rocked, if you're standing up, especially in a title fight, not everyone agrees with that a title fight should be scored differently and they should be given more chance. But if the fighter explicitly says, let me go out if I'm going out, I don't think there's a problem with that. I know it's the referee's job to keep him safe.
Explicitly to Keith Peterson in the back room beforehand.
Right, if he's saying it's my decision here, I'd sooner. And it's one thing, again, if he's on the ground getting pummeled and the ref pulls him off, that's a whole other thing. But if you got rocked and you're trying to get up and get away, as Dominick does, right, with his very elusive style where he's throwing overhands, but his head is almost at someone's hip, like you're susceptible to get kneed there, right? And he did. I don't think it was a good stoppage at all. I thought for every reason that Dominick said to Joe afterwards, he's like, if I'm on the way up, I don't think it's a good stoppage, because if I was out, wouldn't I be on the ground as he's pummeling me? I completely agree with that. I thought up to that point, Cejudo was lighting him up with leg kicks, don't get me wrong. But I don't think that Dom was out, and I think we got robbed of some very, very good rounds to come. And in the end, Cejudo retires, which we'll talk about in a minute. And Jad and I said we thought that it would be Dom who retired with the belt, but instead it was Henry. That's crazy to me as well. But Jad, I want to hear from you as well.
Yeah, man. Honestly, I don't agree 100% with you about the stoppage, because he got dropped with a knee before that. Honestly, if you look at the replay, he's kind of like out of it, man. As he's dropping, he's out of it. If from the ref standpoint, you see a person that's kind of like rolling his eyes back, and then he's like in the all fours position. And what I think, yes, he was getting up, but if you look at the replay, the side from which the rabbit punches are coming, he's kind of bracing himself to stand up, but he's not protecting that side of his face at all, which I thought he could have at least done to kind of show that he's in it. I don't know, man. For me, being dropped like that and then the 10 unanswered punches, I feel like that's fine. And I didn't see much else from Dominick that could have surprised Cejudo. So I'm not too disappointed by the
I'll agree
stoppage.
with the last point you made there for sure. I will agree with the fact that what you said last there. But other than that, I think it was one of the most egregious stoppages, to be honest with you. A knee to the face, he got dropped. He went out for a half second there. I mean, if we're talking about, did you go out at all? Tony Ferguson's fight should have been finished in the first round then. Are you intelligently defending yourself? The first thing the ref said when he hit the ground is get up. And what was he doing? Getting up. How many seconds were left in the fight when he stopped the fight and jumped in there? 2 seconds. 2 seconds were left in the fight. Was he done? Was the fight over with 2 seconds left to go in the round? Dominick said, the round was almost done. Like, what are you doing? He's like, my job is not to know how long is left in the round. I agree to a certain point, but to another point, you got to understand the blitzing, the sprinting at all stops is because you have 1 minute of breath coming up. Do I think that Cruz had what it takes to go to the corner, come out and win this fight? I'm not saying that at all. I'm not saying he would have won the fight. I'm not saying any of that stuff. What I am saying is that it was a pretty bad stoppage considering that Dominick Cruz looked very clearly into the ref's eyes without stumbling, without losing eye contact, and was like, seriously? Like, he didn't flip out. He didn't start throwing a fit. He was just looked at him like, really, bro? I talked to you before this fight took place. You were explaining the rules to me. I asked you to look me in the eyes. You couldn't maintain eye contact with me. I work for this is me putting words in his mouth now. He knows he works for the UFC. He knows he works for ESPN. Like, when you work for the company and you were kind of fighting the hangover, heading into the cage, like, you don't want to look like that. To imagine DC, same thing. You have a certain level of reverence for a guy who calls fights. Like, he can easily just go talk to Dana. I don't know why he smells like booze and cigarettes and whatever. You shouldn't be compromised heading into the fight to referee. There's other people's lives at stake here. The knee was bone shattering. That was disgusting. That was a nice knee. The following up shots, those were nice. We're in the bantamweight division, guys. You're not getting finished like that. Like, I'm sorry, but if that's Francis with 10 unanswered shots, there's no time for that. It's 2 shots, you're out. Whereas this, I want to see a little bit more. It's a championship fight. There is a belt on the line. Let the man go out if he wants to go out. I'm not saying, let this become some violent where he's completely unconscious into late stoppage. I think it was an early stoppage, especially considering there was 2 seconds left. Dominick Cruz has a history of coming through in his rounds being 3, 4, and 5 in championship rounds. Who knows what would have happened? Maybe he would have got finished in the 3rd round. I don't know. It just really sucked to know that Dominick's walking away feeling like, I got caught. That's on me. But I was in the fight and it got stopped. And especially coming off of a 4-year layoff. That's unfortunate. It's now going to the retirement factor, boys. In terms of Cejudo retiring afterwards, complete blindside. Apparently he had talked to Dana White 2 months prior about that. He talked to Brendan Schaub on Food Truck Diaries, and also mentioned that he said he's done. He doesn't get paid enough to do what he does. All that being said, I mean, what do you want the UFC to do when, you're co-main eventing on this type of a card and you are an undisputed champion in 2 different divisions, despite getting stripped from one of them, from flyweight, and you're an Olympic medalist? There comes a point where there's a ceiling and on how much you can make. Also, the new model does not favor pay-per-view buys. It favors the ESPN Plus paying the UFC a $500,000 flat fee of pay-per-view buys worth. That being said, it was crazy to see him just kind of be like, no, I'm out. That's it. Forget about Volkanovski. Forget about all these guys.
Right. You
Go
heard
ahead.
DC, didn't you? He said that Cejudo retired from wrestling at 21, right?
Right.
So
Yep.
right after he got the gold medal at the Olympics. So like it's like he's a smart guy, man. He's a fucking smart guy, you know. He knows how
Hmm.
to be on top and retire when he's on top. That's the problem for most fighters, for most athletes. They don't know when to say when. So hey
Hmm.
man, he got it all. Like how much more can he really like win in terms like he's really on like the top of what he can do at the moment. So I think he's probably like gonna try to leverage that into a business and
He
whatever.
said he wants to start doing some real estate, is what he
Yeah,
said after the
sure.
fight was done. He was interviewing, and he said he wanted to get into some real estate and start opening up some different business avenues for himself. He started apologizing as well, being like, "Oh, all this stuff that I was talking about, you guys, it wasn't personal. You know, it was just to build the brand and whatever, whatever." So he acknowledges he was trolling. He acknowledges all this stuff, and I respect it all. Like, I mean, you want to walk away on top, homie. I respect the shit out of that, to be honest with you, especially in a combat sport where he feels like he's not getting paid an adequate amount or his worth. So fair. Like all thumbs up to him for walking away on his own terms. Nate, what was your thoughts on the retirement?
At first, I was I was confused, to be honest. I was because I
Same.
could understand someone saying I want to go out on top, but usually not in the prime of their career, right? Like it's one thing to go out on top if you're Daniel Cormier, right, and you're trying to win the belt, and it's the last thing you'll ever do, and you say, okay, I'm done. I'm 40-something years old. That's it. I retire. I can understand that. But to say I'm 33 years old, I'm finally becoming an attraction in this division, which is what I've been trying to do for so long. I'm a good heel, which is supposed to be, right? Like, because Chael Sonnen told him, I remember years ago, stop trying to be the face. No one wants to see the face. Be the bad guy. People want to see you. And he goes, okay. And he adopted the King of Cringe because he wasn't menacing enough to be a real villain, right? So he went that way. And I'm like, really? At the pinnacle of your career, where you're beating the best guys in the world, is it because you don't think you can beat guys like, Piotr Jan and Aljamain Sterling? Because I think you probably could, but maybe for him, he's thinking that doesn't do enough for me. Maybe I need someone who's a better dance partner if I'm gonna come back and do something. I don't think he is officially retired. I heard what he said in the post-fight press conference and everything. I believe that he will probably be out for a little and then maybe try to go for a 145-pound, even if it's an interim championship, just something. Maybe he can, if Aldo can get back to the top of 135 or 145, and then maybe try to do that just so that he can add one more thing to the collection. Because do you guys think or my other thought was that he would try to pursue pro boxing, but at 33, I don't know if he can actually become a champion in boxing, especially with his weight class, right? Like those are the best boxers in the world, range from that weight class. So I'm thinking, is he retired? Probably for now, but is this a permanent thing? I think we see Henry Cejudo in a squared circle, be it pro wrestling, a boxing ring, or a cage sooner or later, probably in the next few years, because I can't imagine that someone leaves at the prime of their career like that.
Yo, it's gonna be professional wrestling, man. Trust me. Like that would be the smartest move to if you ask me.
The thing
Big
is, he'd be a
money.
cruiserweight in pro wrestling, and as I'm a big pro wrestling fan here, I just don't see what the allure would be
No.
at least until the crowds come back,
Mm,
where he would never be a world heavyweight champion. It wouldn't matter. It wouldn't help build his brand if he was a cruiserweight because no one would care, right? Mike, I know you watch
that's
pro
true.
wrestling too. What do you think?
Honestly, he has the personality for it, but Vince McMahon likes his larger than life guys. He likes these 7-footers, 6'6", 6'4", 265, 280 pounds. He likes these massive dudes that are jacked. Cejudo's jacked. He's 5'4". We've seen amazingly talented guys come and go from the UFC. I mean, it's from WWE, I should say. Um, and they're just smaller and they don't get the run that they deserve. They don't get the clout that they deserve. They go to they go to other promotions and like New Japan or some lucha.
AW or TNA or something like that.
Exactly. And they
Yeah.
get the shine that they deserve. He his main thing is he's not saying I don't want to compete. I don't have the fire anymore. He's saying I'm not getting paid what I deserve, and I'm not going to put my livelihood on the line. If I want to start having kids and start doing all these different things and thinking about moving into the future, and at the same time jeopardize that, getting paid not what I think I'm worth. And he feels like he's priced himself out of the UFC, and the UFC, from a business standpoint, they're saying you've priced yourself out of what we can pay you. So interesting to see what happens next. The division is obviously, it's going to be in a little bit of a state. Who do you put in the interim there to move forward with the division? Probably Petr Yan. Throw him in there, whether it be Aldo, which I don't know. I guess that's just name brand if you want to get the name brand out there. You could get Aljo if you wanted to go with that. You have a few different names that you could go with in that division to carry it forward. So you're not in dire straits with no hands there to carry this strap. But it was a shocker, to say the very least. It's one of the better kept retirement consideration secrets I've seen in all pro sports, pretty much. This really blindsided me. I did not expect it at all. I didn't think Dominick would retire, and he also confirmed that he would not. You'd be hearing from him again on Ariel Helwani yesterday, on Monday. We're recording this on Tuesday, but very interesting to see how that pans out. I don't know. Let us know in the comment section below what you think about what Cejudo's next steps would be.
Not to mention, let's get Dom versus Aldo for the vacant 135 championship, both coming off losses, both two of the greatest ever.
Don't kill me. Petr Yan would lose his mind. He'd lose his mind.
Screw. You could be an alternate. Who cares? Give us what we want to see. Come on. Or we can get Petr Yan versus either of them. But you're telling me you wouldn't want to see Aldo versus Cruz?
I'd want to watch Petr Yan. He's one of the nastiest fighters in the entire UFC, but no one really talks about him. It's just unfortunate. Again, these smaller dudes, it's harder to make these names for yourself, It's I don't know why, but size matters in a lot of ways, especially for casuals. Let's put it that way. Fifth and final round here: Justin Gaethje versus El Kukui. Justin Gaethje comes out with the win despite our predictions. We put respect on Gaethje's name, but I think he even surprised himself, so we can't be too hard on ourselves either. Heading into that fifth round, he was on the stool with Trevor Whitman, and Trevor Whitman reined him back in and said, hey, remember when you got too comfortable? What happened last time? And then he said, yeah, I lost twice, and he zeroed back in. But he was smiling for a little bit there, showing some positivity, heading into that fifth round there. That was damn impressive of a performance. I have a couple questions. I guess the first and foremost, what were your takeaways from the fight? But also, I think that Gaethje made one of the most poignant points after the fight in the post media scrum, where he said, I would not have cut weight, and I know it would have affected my performance, but I can't speak for Ferguson. So that's also an interesting wrinkle to look at it in terms of not necessarily the durability of the chin of Ferguson, which was obviously on display, but in terms of speed, quickness. Your body had to recover from 2 weeks ago of dropping he walks around at 179 or something, and it goes down to 155. Then you do it again. That's tough on the body. What were some of your takeaways from literally an instant classic, though? This was a real instant classic of an upset.
Yeah, and we were talking about, and we can get to this later, about crowd versus no crowd. But I think if there was a crowd there, this might have been it would have probably gone down as fight of the year, and if not one of the greatest fights ever, just because you'd have the atmosphere behind them, pushing them in everything that they did. I think you guys remember last week when we were doing the preview for this, I was like, I initially thought that this would be an easy win, or not an easy win, but it's very easy to pick Tony. And after thinking about it more, I'm thinking, okay, this actually might favor Justin more than I initially intended. And that was probably the way to go. Because if you look at what he did, he put a clinic on Tony, and he beat Tony bad for 25 minutes. As we were talking about earlier against Francis, who would you rather fight, Francis or Gaethje? Francis, because at least I'm going out quick, right? This was 24 and a half really minutes of torture for Tony, where he couldn't get close enough to get his elbows. He didn't try to shoot. I don't know if it's because, he had the one ankle pick, but he got out of that. And then he tried the Imanari roll once, and then Gaethje just kind of walked away from it.
That was round 4. The fight was already done.
Right. And he had lost most of his explosive energy. What I think happened for Tony is that I think Tony was anticipating Gaethje would get tired because I don't think he would have been able to continue to put that pressure on in the pace. And then he thought, okay, I can weather the storm for the first 2 rounds, and then I'm going to take it to him in rounds 3, 4, and 5.
That's all I
And
was saying
then,
with my boys.
but then what happened? Gaethje said, okay, well, actually, I got the stamina. I could do this all day. All of that did was it stopped Tony. It took away Tony's explosiveness and speed because he was so hurt for so much of the fight where he couldn't bring Justin into deep waters because, as we found out, Gaethje can swim for a long time. And we've seen in the past when Justin is hurt and tired, it's very noticeable in the way that he fights.
He labors.
He starts to wobble and he starts to bury himself. And that's where a lot of the predictions came that Tony would slice him up with the elbows because he'd be coming towards him with his hands up and just getting lit up. But he didn't do that. He stayed at kicking range and hurt Tony with those freaking shots. And despite having a 6.5-inch reach disadvantage, he just landed bombs all night long. And props to Tony for being so tough. And it's heartbreaking that he won't get that title shot against Khabib. But I think that is still a possibility, and we can talk about that a little later. But I want to hear from Jad in the clinic here.
Yeah, totally. First of all, I agree with what Mike said about the weight cut. Like I remember us talking before the fight, and I'm pretty sure I was considering that as well. Like, come on, man, you can't put yourself through that and expect that your body's just like not a problem at all. Like it's just gonna be fine. That's a lot of weight to cut in such short time. Doing it twice, for sure, it affected somewhat his reactions or speed or something. He didn't look bad, not at all. Tony was great, but he didn't have an answer for a lot of those quick punches. I felt like Justin was just a lot more tuned in, a lot more sharper and precise, a lot more patient than he's ever been before. And Tony just didn't know what to do, in that case. So I feel like it was a great win, man. He deserves. Khabib is going to be a very interesting fight. And
he took advantage of him. He took advantage of a man who doesn't tuck his chin. The first 2 basics of striking: tuck your chin, hands up. What does Ferguson do?
When did he get dropped in the 3rd round?
Gaethje?
Yeah,
end of the second.
End of the second
with the uppercut.
Yes, but he remember after that he was like right away in his corner. He was like, "Yep, I got complacent or whatever." Like
that's it. Yeah. And that's his biggest enemy. I feel like it's just himself. He's amazing, and I feel like he surprised himself. The look in his eye at the beginning, in between the 4th and 5th round, he was like, "Whoa!" Like I'm here, and I'm smiling, and I'm outperforming this guy who like outswims everybody, takes in the deep waters and drowns them. Like I'm not going to drown. The new Gaethje, after those 2 losses to Poirier and to Alvarez, this is calculated aggression, not barbaric aggression. He's reined it in enough while staying true to who he is. And he took advantage of a guy who does everything unorthodox, including his stance and his defense, and took advantage of the fact that this guy just doesn't cover his chin. And he just expects me to gas out from hitting him. I'm going to only gas out if I throw 20 punches when I should have thrown 5. And he did exactly that for the entirety of the fight. And God bless Tony Ferguson, broken orbital bone, looking like a different human being. I saw some montages and them dabbing up before the fight, and you see like Tony Ferguson looking normal. Then you look afterwards, and what you guys make I don't know if you guys noticed this, but immediately afterwards, Tony was kind of – he kind of was like, get away from me, like kind of angry, and the emotion of the whole thing kind of soaked up. And he turned it around quick. He didn't hold on to that kind of Luke Rockhold, I'm a horrible loser type of mentality. But for a moment there, I think even Ferguson was shocked. And I think it really does play into the psychological warfare. And I don't know if this was intentional or Justin straight up just didn't know if he could believe in himself on that level of him talking about having only 18 good minutes in him. And he got us to believe it. He got everyone to believe it. And maybe that's because he believed it. And he proved something to himself that night that he can go a full 25 in there with the best in the world, with some of the best cardio we've ever seen, period. That being said, I want to turn this over to you, Nate. Do you think that was intentional? Do you think that was by design? Do you think Justin knew he could go? Or do you think he actually just had no idea and he surprised himself?
I think that Justin Gaethje thought under his usual style, he had 18 minutes. But given how he paced himself for this fight, where he was very aggressive and forward, because remember we said, well, you know, Tony puts a pace on you, but I think Justin will match him every step of the way up to a certain point. The thing is, I think with him relaxing and not going in for the kill every time he rocked Tony, he was able to conserve his energy and preserve it over 25 minutes. I think that probably that was surprising to him. But Justin Gaethje is a cardio machine too. Anybody who comes out of wrestling is usually a cardio machine. They usually never ever get tired, right? Because they're used to just grappling for so long. And as Joe Rogan said, he uses his wrestling to keep the fight standing because that's where he wants to be, because he hits like a freaking truck. And yeah, I think that if he had gone in for the kill more times, he might have been able to finish Tony sooner, but he might have also gassed out and then lost in the next round.
Got clipped by an elbow even.
Right, which I think it was very smart. And I think if he does this to somebody else, not named Tony Ferguson, but even if I'm going like, let's say he rematches Eddie Alvarez or Dustin Poirier, he might beat both of them fighting like this. Where he's like, listen, man,
100%, 100%.
And
he rocked them both in both of the fights. He rocked them badly.
Right. So, and then he went in for kill and got rocked and so on. But if he's just staying more calculated and he's like, listen, I have faith in my power and it's just going to hurt so bad every time I hit you, and I'm going to brutalize your freaking legs. I tell you what, man, like it's a cold style.
That reminded me of Israel Adesanya, his performance against Derek Brunson. Just knock down, hurt, you're hurt again, I'm just better than you, and it's proving it. But the thing with Izzy is we expected this coming in. This is like, I remember Joe Rogan, this is going to be a real first good test for Izzy against Derek Brunson. He's a world-class wrestler. Can he stay standing? We ended up watching that fight being like, how this is the record for knockdowns in a fight. Like, that's what we ended up seeing. This was like, I don't know, Ferguson, the weight cut, the damage he took during the fight, combine that with Gaethje's cautious and calculated aggression, and it culminated in this perfect performance. And the style of fight, of course, style of fighting from Ferguson, the lack of defense. And it culminated in this perfect just display, magnificent display of Gaethje being able to put his whole game on display for the world to see there. That was amazing. Now, that concludes our five good rounds there. We're not done with Gaethje though, so we'll catch us in the next video where we break that down.